Chapter 7 of Beyond the Rocks, a Love Story by Elinor Glyn. At 12 o'clock punctually, Lord Bracondale was ushered into Mrs. McBride's sitting room at the Ritz, the day after her dinner party at Armenonville. He expected she would not be ready to receive him for at least half an hour. Having said 12, he might have known she meant half past. But he was in a mood of impatience, and felt obliged to be punctual. He was suffering more or less from a reaction. He had begun towards morning to realize the manner in which he had spent the evening was not altogether wise. Not that he had the least intention of repeating his folly. Indeed, he was where he was at this hour for no other purpose than to enlist the widow's sympathy, and her cooperation in arranging as many opportunities for similar evenings as together they could devise. After all, she only kept him waiting 20 minutes, and he had been rather amused looking at the piles of bric-a-brac obsequious art dealers had left for this rich lady's inspection. A number of spurious bronzes warranted pure antique, clocks, brocades, what not, lying about on all the available space. "And I wonder what it will look like in her marble palace halls," he thought, as he passed from one article to another. "I am just too sorry to keep you, mon cher Bracondale," Mrs. McBride said presently, suddenly opening the adjoining door a few inches. "But it is a quite exasperating hat which has delayed me. I can't get the thing on at the angle I want. "Mayn't I come and help, dear lady?" interrupted Hector. "I know all about the subject. I had to buy 47 at Monte Carlo, and see them all tried on, too, and only lately. Do ask Marie to open that door a little wider. I will decide in a minute how it should be." "Insolent!" said the widow, who spoke French with perfect fluency, and a quite marvelously pure American accent, but she permitted the giggling and beaming Marie to open the door wide, and let Hector advance and kiss her hand. He then took a chair by the dressing-table and inspected the situation. 7 or 8 dainty hand-boxes strewed the floor, some of their contents peeping from them. Feathers, aigrette, flowers, impossible birds, all had their place. And on the sofa were 3 chefs d'oeuvres, ruthlessly tossed aside, while in the widow's fair hands was a gem of gray tulle and the most expensive feather heart of woman could desire. "You see," she said, plaintively, "it is meant to go just so," and she placed it once more upon her head, a handsome head of 45, fresh and well preserved and comely. "But the vile-tempered thing refuses to stay there once I let go, and no pin will correct it." "Base ingratitude," said Lord Bracondale, with feeling. "But couldn't you stuff these in the hiatus?" And he tenderly lifted a bunch of nut-brown curls from the dressing-table. "They would fill up the gap and keep the fractious thing steady." "Of course they would," said Mrs. McBride. "But I have a rooted objection to auxiliary nature trimmings. That bunch was sent with the hat, and Marie has been trying to persuade me to wear it ever since we began this struggle. But I won't. My hair's my own, and I don't mean to have anyone else's alongside of it. There is my trouble. If milord would hold Madame's at one side, while I the other, Madame might force her emerald hairpin through him," suggested Marie, which advice was followed, and the widow beamed with satisfaction at the gratifying result. "There!" she exclaimed with a sigh of relief. "That will do, and I am just ready. Gloves, handkerchief, oh, and my purse, Marie." And in 5 minutes more she was leading the way back into her sitting room. "I have not ordered lunch until 1 o'clock," she said, "so we have oceans of time to talk and tell each other secrets. Sit down, jeune homme, and confess to me." She pointed to a bergère, but it was filled with Italian embroideries. "Marie, take this rubbish away," she called, and presently some chairs were made clear. "And what must I confess?" asked Hector, when they were seated. "That I am frantically in love with you, and your coldness is driving me wild?" "Certainly not," said the widow, while she rose again and began to arrange some giant roses in a wonderful basket which looked as if it had just arrived. Her shrewd eye had seen the card, "From Captain Fitzgerald with his best bonjour." "Certainly not. We are going to talk truth, or, to punish you, I shall not ask you to meet her again, and I shall warn her father of your strictly dishonorable intentions." "You would not be so cruel." "Yes, I would, and it is what I ought to do anyway. She is as innocent as a woolly lamb, and unsophisticated and guileless, and will probably be falling in love with you. You take the wind out of the sails of that husband of hers, you see." "Do I?" said Hector, with overdone incredulity. She looked at him. His long, lithe limbs stretched out, every line indicative of breeding and strength. She noted the shape of his head, the perfect grooming, his lazy, insolent grace, his whimsical smile. Englishmen of this class were certainly the most provokingly beautiful creatures in the world. "It is because they have done nothing but order men, kill beasts, and subjugate women for generations," she said to herself. "Lazy, naughty darlings! If they came to our country and worked their brains a little, they would soon lose that look. But it would be a pity," she added. "Yes, a pity." "What are you thinking of?" asked Lord Bracondale, while she gazed at him. "I was thinking you are a beautiful, useless creature, just like all your nation. You think the world is made for you. In any case, all the women and animals to kill are." "What an abominable libel! But I am fond of both things, women and animals to kill." "And you class them equally? Or perhaps the animals are ahead?"
"Indeed, not always," said Hector, reassuringly. "Some women have quite the first place."
"You are too flattering," retorted the widow. "Those sentiments are all very well for your own poor-spirited, downtrodden women, but they won't do for Americans. A man has to learn a number of lessons before he is fitted to cope with them."
"Oh, tell me," said Hector.
"He has got to learn to wait, for one thing, to wait about for hours, if necessary, and not to lose his temper because the woman can't make up her mind to be in time for things, or to change it often as to where she will dine. Then he has to learn to give up any pleasure of his own for hers, and travel when she wants to travel, or stay home when she wants to go alone. If he is an Englishman he don't have brains enough to make the money, but he must let her spend what he has got how she likes, and not interfere with her own."
"And in return he gets?"
"The woman he happens to want, I suppose." And the widow laughed, showing her wonderfully preserved brilliant white teeth.
"You enunciate great truths, Beldam," said Hector, "and your last sentence is the greatest of all. The woman he happens to want."
Which brings us back to our muttons. In this case only a defenseless baby lamb. Now tell me what you are here for, trying to cajole me with your good looks and mock humility.
"I am here to ask you to help me to see her again, then," said Hector, who knew when to be direct. "I have only met her 3 times, as you know, but I have fallen in love, and she is going away next week, and there is only one Paris in the world."
"You can do a great deal of mischief in a week," Mrs. McBride said, looking at him again critically. "I ought not to help you, but I can't resist you. There, what shall we devise?"
"It is possible the probability of Theodora's father making a 4th
may have had something to do with her complacence. Anyway, it was decided that if feasible, the four should spend a day at Versailles. They should go in their 2 automobiles in time for breakfast at the Reservoirs. They would start, Theodora and Mrs. McBride's with her, and Captain Fitzgerald with Lord Bracondale, and each couple could spend the afternoon as they pleased, dining again at the Reservoirs, and whirling back to Paris in the moonlight. A truly rural and refreshing programme, good for the soul of man.
"And I can rely upon you to get rid of the husband," said Lord Bracondale finally. "I do not see the poetry of the affair with his bald head and mutton chop whiskers as an accessory."
"Leave that to Captain Fitzgerald and myself," said Mrs. McBride proudly. "I have a scheme that Mr. Brown shall spend the day with Clutterbuck R. Tubbs, examining some new machinery they are both interested in. Leave it to me." The part of Deus ex machina was always a role the widow loved. Then they descended to an agreeable lunch in the restaurant, with a numerous party of her friends as usual, and Lord Bracondale felt afterwards full of joy and hope to continue his sinful path unrepenting. The days that intervened before Theodora saw him again were uneventful and full of blankness. The walks in the Bois appeared more tedious than ever in the morning, the drives in the acacias more exasperating. It was a continual alertness to see if she caught sight of a familiar face, but she never did. Fate was against them, as she sometimes is when she means to compensate soon after by some glorious day of the gods. And although Lord Bracondale called at her hotel, and walked where he thought he should see her, and even drove in the acacias, they had no meeting. Josiah did not feel himself sufficiently strong to stand the air of theatres, and they went nowhere in the evenings. He was keeping himself for his own dinner party, which was to take place at the Madrid on the Monday. Captain Fitzgerald had arranged it, and besides Mrs. McBride, several of his friends were coming, and a special band of wonderfully talented Tziganes who were delighting Paris that year had been engaged to play to them. If only the weather should remain fine, all would be well. A surprise awaited Theodora on Saturday morning. A friendly note from Mrs. McBride arrived, asking her if she would spend the day with her at Versailles, as she had asked her husband to do her a favor and lunch with Mr. Clutterbuck R. Tubbs. Theodora awaited Josiah's presence at the premier déjeuner, which they took in their salon, with absolute excitement. He came in, a pompous smile on his face.
"Good day, my love,"
he said, blandly.
"That charming widow writes me this morning, asking if I will do her a favor, and take her friend, Mr. Clutterbuck Tubbs, to examine that machinery for the separation of fats we both have an interest in, and he suggests I should lunch with him, as he is very anxious to have my opinion upon the merits of it."
"Yes," said Theodora.
"She also says,"
referring to the letter in his hand,
"she will take charge of you for the day, and take you to Versailles, which I know you wish to go to. She wants an answer at once, and she will call for you at 12 o'clock if we accept."
"I have heard from her too," said Theodora. "What shall you answer, Josiah?" And she looked out of the window.
"Oh, I may as well go, I think. There is money in the invention, or that old gimlet eye would not be so keen about it. I talked the matter over with him at Armenonville the other night."
"Then shall you write, or shall I?" said Theodora, as evenly as she could. "Her servant is waiting." End of chapter 7.